you, Carla, and thank you, as Carla said, to each and every one of you that has joined us today. So we'll jump right into it. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, everything that we will discuss today, we are all about keeping things practical and functional, and we feel very strongly about the fact that whatever we do, it needs to be effective and it needs to work for our kids, especially. So that is something. It's one thing to speak about a lot of theory, and that's important in its place, but we are all about keeping things practical, especially for us as parents and teachers. Perhaps it needs to work in real life as well. So that is something that you will definitely see throughout the course of this webinar today. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that we are going to look at is communication, and that is one of the most, if not the most important aspect when we think about any child, but especially our autistic children as well. Now, often when we think of communication, we tend to think of teaching our children ways to request things, to request what they want, to think about letting us know what they need, and that is definitely a huge part of it. But something that we don't often think of, and this is one that we chose to discuss with you today, and we'll touch on a few other things as well. Teaching our kids to say no, teaching them to let us know when they don't want to do something. If you think about a baby and moving into a young toddler, one of the first things that they learn to do very confidently is saying no. And sometimes it's with words, if that is something that they can do. Perhaps they're a little bit older. Sometimes it's with a gesture, pushing us away or turning their head away if they don't want to eat something, perhaps. And it's just as important for our kids to learn how to let us know when they don't want something, when they're not comfortable with something. It's our job as parents and teachers to make sure that we're teaching our child how they can let us know if they're not comfortable with a situation, with something, with someone, perhaps even, or to let us know when they don't want to do something. And that's important and okay for them to let us know about those things. So if we think about ways to teach our children, and this is with saying no or asking for breaks, but also when we think of communication in general, we've got an intensive parenting course where we go into a lot of detail on communication, and we look at quite a few modes of communication to consider when we look at our child specifically. We need to make sure with communication that the way that we are going to teach our child to communicate, it needs to work for our child. Sometimes, especially as a parent, perhaps it's quite tempting to try and select a mode of communication that's comfortable or easy for us. And it is tempting to do that, but it's important that we need to make sure that the mode of communication works for our child specifically. It needs to work, and it also needs to be easy enough for them to use. If the mode of communication, and going back to saying no or letting us know when they don't want something or when they need a break, if it's too difficult for them to use, they won't use it, or they'll choose a different way, which often happens to be crying or screaming or kicking or biting, letting us know they don't want this, they don't agree with us, they want to get out of here. So we need to make sure that we're teaching them a way that they can actually use, and that's easy enough for them to use, and it's working. So if we look at these two options, these are two to consider, and you can consider these for your child as well. Saying no with a gesture, a simple head shake for no, or raising a hand to stop or to say wait or no. Or then the second one, having a visual cue card. And that can be, I'm going to show you some examples. That can look like this. The examples at the top with a boy and the girl of I need a break. You can make a little card with your child's photo in there, where we're going to teach them, as soon as I give mom or dad or my teacher or my sibling this card, it means I need to take a break. I want to stop doing what we're busy with at the moment. I don't want to finish my meal right now. I can't continue with this game at the moment. I need a break for now. Or the second row, the stop sign or the hand up for the break. These are ones that you can look at and choose with your child if that's possible. Involve them as much as we can to make sure that this mode of communication is going to work for them. So these are some examples for break cards. It will be important when you start implementing this with your child that we guide them in the beginning so that we can show them how to use it. And then when they become a little bit more independent as well, but even from the beginning, we need to prove to them that it works. So when they're busy with something, even if it's something that you really wanted them or planned for them to finish, if they're starting to hand you this card or show you the gesture that you've taught them, we need to prove to them that they are going to get a break now, or we are stopping because they requested for it. So this is something important to keep in mind with regards to breaks, also with regards to communication. As I mentioned in our intensive parenting course, we do go through quite a few modes of communication, and there is one in particular that's actually quite similar to these break cards, but we go into a lot more detail that unfortunately we can't discuss everything today. But using these visual cue cards as well as other things to help our children find a mode of communication that's really effective and it works for them. It's easy enough for them to use and to relate to. Then if we look at the next slide, I'm going to show you two examples. The one is of movement breaks, and then the one on the next slide is of sensory breaks. So you'll find exactly the same ones in your handouts. So if we look at these, this is something that you can do with your child as well. You can make a little board or a poster for them where we would suggest, again, taking photos of your child doing these activities or your child's toys. It's easier sometimes, less time consuming to just download pictures from the internet, but especially if you're starting out with this mode of communication and teaching your child, we want them to be able to relate to these things. So if your child has certain Play-Doh or a certain sensory bin, go and take a picture, print it out, and use that one on these little posters that you're going to make for them. Now, the idea with the movement and the sensory break, you might not necessarily do this right from the start. You might want to start with teaching your child how to request a break first. So now when my child requests a break or to stop, we right away agree with them, listen to them. Okay, we're going to take a break. We're going to stop. What would you like to do then? We've stopped what we were busy with. What should we do instead? What do you want to do instead? And then we can show them these sensory break boards or a movement break board. You're going to start slowly though, just with one or two of their favorite things, and show them the board and let them choose. Okay, I see Play-Doh, that's something I like, or listening to music. I want to do listening to music now. And we're giving them a way of letting us know what they would do instead. This is really forming the basis, part of forming the basis of sensory and emotional regulation as well. We're teaching them to let us know when they need the break, and then also what do they need to help them feel better, to help them calm down, to help them reset their focus, or just have some quiet time before they move on to the activity or to a different activity. And then I'm going to hand it back to Carla to just one or two questions perhaps that she's received throughout this time with regards to communication only.
Thank you, Nanette. Yes, one of the questions was a brilliant question. It said, I just wrote it down here, my child is already speaking. Are these movement and sensory breaks important for him? And I think that's a very good question. And innately, we want to ask ourselves that. It seems so simple, but my child is already past this. And definitely it is important, because if we think about all of us, we need a mode of, or a way of asking for a break, even if we're busy with our work. But you can expand on this. And this leads to the second question about how do I increase my child's communication by teaching them to ask for a break? So once you teach your child, that's the emotional regulation that Nanette was speaking about, which is super important for our kids for later on. they're able to state what they want to do in these breaks. Often we kind of direct our kids and say, okay, you need to take a break, you need to go and sit down for 5 minutes, or you need to go into your sensory tent, which we think is an amazing thing, and it is an amazing thing, but our child might not need that type of input at that stage. So that's why it's super important to do that sensory profile, and which we'll speak of in a little bit, but also to understand that our kids need different types of breaks at different stages. So for a child to be able to ask for a break is very important, but then you can expand on their language with that break, with that request. So they can ask for a break, they can ask for what type of input they want, they can let you know if they want you to be there. They can also expand on their interest while they're busy in their break. So let's say their break is going outside and just like twirling around for 5 minutes. They can then say, join me or come with me, and you can do some pairing sounds. So before I get into too much of other things that you can do, yes, it's definitely important. And I also know that from speaking to a very good friend of ours who's autistic, and she's here today, so she will be speaking with you guys at the end. She even mentioned, she said that's one of the most important things for her as an autistic adult, is to have been taught at a younger age to ask for those breaks, because that leads into self-regulation and to become more aware of what you need. And later on, that could decrease anxiety. So even if it seems very like a simple gesture, oh, okay, my child needs to ask for a break, it is a very important concept to learn and to keep learning about until you're older. Because I think that even as adults, I don't feel like we ask for the breaks that we need. So saying that, if you do need to get up and do a bit of a movement break, we won't judge you for your dancing. So please go ahead and do that. Nanette, I'm going to hand over to you to the second module.